Welcome to day 2 of Game Over International, day 2 of the Beijing Olympic Games 2022. Lots of twos today. I'm going to get right into it. I'm going to welcome in my guest, Sean Fitz-Gerald from The Athletic, the senior guy. I mean, senior's not the worst description when you're talking about job title, right?
I think it just means I'm old. Maybe it's a bald thing. I don't know. But yeah, no, thanks for having me on. Happy to be here.
Oh, it's my absolute pleasure. I was very overjoyed that you agreed to come on. And listen,
Yeah,
I'm catching up to
overjoyed's
you
a
quickly with the
strong word.
balding.
Overjoyed's a strong word, but I appreciate it and I'll take it.
No, I am. I'm excited because we haven't had a ton of chances to talk over the years, but I'm a big fan of your work, and I feel like having people on that I'm a big fan of that I get to chat with is part of the joy of getting to host these kinds of shows. Right? It's been getting me through the Montreal Canadiens season. Having to cover that team is just having interesting people on to talk to because the team's not very interesting.
Has that season started? I wasn't aware. I'm not sure.
We'll pretend it hasn't, but. So a few things happened so far on day 2. I think the biggest one for Canada is that a big rebound day for the mixed doubles curling team between John Morris and Rachel Homan. 3 straight victories. Did you get a chance to watch any of that curling?
Yeah. I've watched, geez, what do we got? I think I probably watched about 2/3 of them so far. I mean, John Morris started off probably definitely the shakier of the two. Rachel Homan's just been dialed in, especially the one last night. She had a couple of incredible raised double, a couple of fantastic shots. And frankly, John Morris, I think, is probably my most quotable athlete of the game so far. I think he might have slipped in a Trailer Park Boys reference last night when they were talking about shots, and he said that's our worst case Ontario.
I mean, we all love the Trailer Park Boys references. I feel like most of the references have gone the way of I'm blanking on the name now, but the new show that's like the Canadian one that's gone off from the guy
Letterkenny,
who played Don Cherry.
Letterkenny,
Letterkenny, that's the name. Yeah, that
Letterkenny,
one's like the new
Jared
big
Piso.
reference, right?
Well, I mean, the thing is, there, I don't know if you could get a lot of the language of Letterkenny on the CBC.
It's
It's certainly
true.
not even after dark. Frankly, even at this time of day, I'm a little leery of even trying to quote something without having a full coffee in me first.
I hear
But yeah,
that.
I mean, John Morris has been fantastic. I mean, Rachel Holman has been fantastic on the ice. And while John's probably still trying to catch up, he's at least had some really good moments. I mean, he had I think it was in that first match where he was struggling against Great Britain, and Colleen Jones got him at the fourth end, because there's only 8 ends in mixed doubles. And he goes and he says something along the lines of, Rachel's going great and I suck. And he picked it up. I mean, not so much that first game, but yeah, I mean, it was something along the similar script to what he and Caitlin Laws had 4 years ago, right? Like, I think they dropped their opener and then eventually, caught fire and won the whole thing. I mean, this is a super team of two. Like, if, John Morris and Rachel Homan are so accomplished, Morris, a bit more so at the Olympic level, but Rachel Homan's been a star on the national, international level for Canada for, geez, if I start to think back about how long now, I'm going to age myself even more.
Yeah, I mean, it's a recognizable name even for people who don't follow curling every day, right? This team has high aspirations, and Canada is the only team in mixed doubles to win a gold medal since it debuted in the last Olympics. So I think we're all itching to keep it that way. And I'm sure there were probably some nerves in that first game because Great Britain is, I believe, the reigning world champion coming into these games in mixed doubles curling. So it could be a situation where it's just your top competition is your first game, and maybe they just got the better of John a little bit there, and now they'll ease into it throughout the games here. There's a lot of games every day essentially for the curlers. They don't get much of a break, and by the time the medal round comes around, they'll be humming.
Well, I mean, it's interesting to take a look back. I mean, I don't know if we can ever discount how much the preparations of this have been impacted by Mick's grand sweeping gesture. I mean, not at my basement
Yeah,
specifically, but I mean,
all
like, of the
this.
pandemic. Yes, all of this. I mean, they were training in isolation, and I don't say that as like a cute sort of metaphor here. Like, they were like Jack Nicholson in The Shining isolation. They were up in the mountains in Canmore, you know, ice fishing and snowshoeing and cross country skiing during the day, which again doesn't sound so bad, but unless you're forced to, and you can't cross paths with another human being because a single positive COVID case could ruin your entire games. And the Canmore Golf and Curling Club gave them dedicated ice at night, so they go and they practice at night and then avoid all the human beings, but still wear masks in the common areas. And then during the day, they train, and then you have to get all the way over to Beijing without coming across anybody who might contaminate you with COVID. And then you get into the venue for the very first time. And then you step onto the ice as, the known super team with all of these expectations for gold. So, yeah, I mean, it's not the greatest start. As Devin Haru at the CBC has pointed out, like they have a very top heavy schedule where, they face the former Olympic medalists. They face, I guess you're not a former Olympic medalist. They face the Olympic medalists from 2018. They face world champions. And then after that, they'll probably settle out and get in better position for the big games.
Yeah, and I think anytime that you come into a Winter Olympics in your Canadian and you have medal aspirations, like the pressure is just so high. Ever since they started the Own the Podium program, it seems like every year we want to get like a record number of medals, and obviously it's tough to equal what happened in Vancouver. It was such a magical situation, but the aspirations for the country in terms of like medal count and gold count have completely changed since that Olympics. So there's a
Isn't
lot of
that a
pressure
neat
on these
conversation
athletes.
too? That's a neat conversation too, because I mean, before 2010, you mentioned Own the Podium. There's other funding mechanisms, excuse me, that have cropped up too. Like B210 is a Montreal-based private Olympic booster club, basically, except it's backed by, or has been backed and was started by some of the wealthiest people in Canada. Andre Desmarais, the head of the Power Corp, has spoken to the group, and B210 is, Andrew Berkshire has a problem with his bobsled. He needs a new one. So you present a business case saying, you know what, 2022, I'm going to dominate, but I have to get rid of this rust bucket. So they'll say, okay, here's the money, but you have to meet these conditions. And they give you training help, they give you physio help, they give you sports psychology, they bring you into their elite development camps. Like what 2010 did, I think, was completely flip the narrative of how we approach sports as Canadians. That, the old joke, from 1976 Montreal, 1988 Calgary, was that fourth place was Canadian bronze.
Yes, yeah.
That, you get there, it's like, well, hey, you know what? Gosh, they tried real hard. God, good on them. And you know what? Like, to get to the Olympics, that's a big deal. And to get on the podium anywhere is an even bigger deal. And I'm not taking away from that at all. But the expectation was, isn't that great? We got on the podium. Canada didn't win gold in 1976. They didn't win gold in 1988. They came into 2010 having never won gold, the only country to host the games to never win gold at their home games. But because the funding model had been switched and the philosophy at which Canadians approach the games had completely changed. So we went from saying, okay, we have $100. We're going to spread this $100 equally over, more or less equally, over biathlon, ski jump, ice dance, hockey. We're going to spread it all equally because our philosophy as Canadians is, the Olympics is a chance for all of us to compete and participate. And that's the goal. That's the philosophy. 2010 flipped that, where it said, no, we're gonna become assassins here, and we're gonna fund you based on results. And that has, over the course of what we're less than 2 decades in, completely changed our funding principles and our approach, and frankly, our results on the global stage. To now, I mean, you're going to have a lot of trouble keeping up with how many Canadians win gold and win silver and win bronze.
And as much as getting to the Olympics at all and finishing fourth is fun, and you appreciate the athletes, and I think we still have to like maintain that appreciation that we always had for the athletes just being there and competing. It is a lot more fun when you bring home the hardware. So it's a little bit like capitalistic, and there's the magic of the games is the athletes, not the Olympics themselves or the IOC, which I think we can agree is not exactly the most ethical situation or organization. But the athletes and winning gold and seeing them triumph over things like, I mean, I hate to keep going back to 2010 because it was such a magical time, but you think of like that Stephen Brunt video essay at the end of the games there, before when men even won gold in hockey, and it was already such a successful games from like Johnny Rochette, from Alexandre Bilodeau, like all these things that trickled down. And then you see, we've got by the end of the weekend, we're going to have Mikhail Kingsbury competing for gold in moguls, which is the possibility of a fourth straight gold in men's moguls. Like that's incredible. The difference that essentially a decade makes. I guess it's 12 years now, but yeah, Mikhail Kingsbury, just to smoothly transition that in, finished number one in qualifiers for the moguls. Seemed to be number one with a bullet, and he looks poised to do exactly what he did in Pyeongchang.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of those sports too that, I mean, you take a look and you watch it. And I think, Andrew, it'd be a really interesting exercise to sit back and take a look and say, you know what? I'd be comfortable doing that Olympic sport in the winter. How many winter sports would you be comfortable trying? Right? Like that's one of those where you're like, no way. I have a functioning, I mean, they're old, but a functioning MCL, a functioning LCL. I still have a meniscus. Like, there's no way I'm trying moguls. So you really go through it, right? Like how many Olympic winter sports would you be comfortable trying? Okay, hockey, we'll scrap that one off. But like speed skating, I mean, those are difficult blades. Moguls, like there go your knees. Ski jump, hell no. I just watched Eddie the Eagle, the one with Hugh
Oh
Jackman
yeah.
over the weekend. I mean, it kind of teared me up, but there's no way in hell I'm doing that. Moguls is one of those where you're watching it on TV. It's like, okay, they're skating over bumps, but I've been there. Like I was at the bottom of the hill in Sochi. Those things are massive. It's like jumping over a VW bug, and they do it all the time. And to do it for that long and at the level Mikhail Kingsbury has for so long, it's one of those sports that unfortunately, outside of Quebec, we just don't, I think, appreciate um, the magnitude of what he's accomplished.
Absolutely. And every time I watch the moguls, I think in my head, how many of them could I do before I fall? And I don't think the number is that high. Like I don't think I'd get past one hit.
Like Jennifer Heil was a moguls star for Canada,
Yes.
and ended up, helping drive B210, and is one of the people behind the scenes who's, I mean, really deserves more kudos for just how successful Canada's become because of these improved funding mechanisms. But she paid the price surgically with some of those knees, right? Like that's a tough sport physically.
Yeah, I can't imagine. I mean, you look at just the wear and tear that athletes deal with any sport, really, and you look at like I heard stories of like Andre Agassi after he retired from tennis, and just like all of his joints were destroyed. And you look at goaltenders in hockey, every hockey player with head injuries, football players, like the ones that compete in the Olympics and sports that don't really get their time to shine outside of the Olympics, you wonder how little we take care of those people at the end of it, because Alexandre Bilodeau essentially retired by around age 30, right? And this, like, we don't know if this will be Mikhail Kingsbury's last games, but as he's getting a little bit older, it's very possible. So it's a tough thing, like, you want to celebrate the accomplishments, but there's that other side of your brain that's going like, how much are these people putting themselves through for this fleeting moment of glory? As much as like you have it forever in your memories, and of course like the country will remember you and all that, but I don't know if we do a good enough job taking advantage of getting these athletes paid at the end of the day. I think we're doing better, but we could probably still do better yet.
Canadian Olympic Committee a few Olympic cycles ago finally started taking some look in towards this. I still don't know that they're doing enough necessarily, but of helping athletes transition out of sport. Because I mean, just like hockey players, that hockey players forego a regular high school education. I'll put that with maybe an asterisk there. And a lot of them who go to the junior hockey obviously forego university education. So if you're a big superstar and you can buy half of Northern Alberta and put a massive house on it like Connor McDavid, that's one thing. But if you make a living for a few years as a fourth liner, like you still have to work. And frankly, even if you are Connor McDavid, once you retire, you can only play so much golf from the age of, 35 onwards. So at least in hockey and in pro sports, you do have that financial cushion. But I mean, there are stories of Olympic swimmers, of Olympians, in biathlon, who compete and compete, and by the time they're done, they're still in their late 20s, early 30s. But while their classmates from university had gone on to do those internships to start their careers and are now already on that corporate treadmill, you're now at 28, 29, 30 saying, okay, God, am I going to be an intern now? How does that work? So the COC has done some work with its Olympic partners. I mean, you have four pretty big pillar sponsors. You have RBC, Canadian Tire, SO, where you can provide sort of launch pads, and they're starting to look towards that. But yeah, that's a real question that still I think needs a definitive answer of how can we help our Canadian athletes who they will say they don't give up so much because they do it because they love it, but there is a trade-off. So how can we help sort of ease that transition once they're done and go into real life like the rest of us?
Yeah, absolutely. We
Again,
have
not that I'm real life because I don't have a real job either, but for
yeah,
somebody
tell
who
me
else
about
is in
it.
a real job.
I just get to talk to you on a live YouTube
You're
video.
the one
That's
who
my
has a
job.
real job now. I just sit here, drink my coffee.
All right. We have a question that's come up a couple times here in the stream chat, and that is essentially, well, I guess to you, Sean, first of all, and I'll answer after. What is your favorite sport to watch in the Olympics outside of hockey?
Oh, dude.
You
Oh
can pick a
man.
couple if you don't want to be
Oh
exclusive.
no. Can I go a bit off stream here? My favorite ever Olympic moment, and I only got to go to two. I mean, I got to go 2012 London, and I got to go to 2014 Sochi. The best thing, and I'm not saying this lightly, the best thing I have ever seen in my entire life was the women's gold medal boxing final at the 2012 games in London. So I went there and I was spending a lot of time following Mary Spencer, boxer from Windsor, who was a world champion, who was expected to win. As it turned out, sort of the moment, the stage, we talked about preparation and pressure earlier, it kind of got to her. She didn't perform up to expectation, her own expectation. It was a very tough story. But we're in the mix zone after her loss, and all of a sudden, it's in London, and it's in a convention center. So all of the stands are aluminum, right? They're just the temporary stands. And all of a sudden, it sounds like a tropical rainstorm out there, like thump, 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 feet jumping up and down, just anticipation while we're in the mix zone. And I poke my head out, and there's this Irish boxer who's fighting. Her name's Katie Taylor. So I make a note. I'm like, well, that's interesting. If she wins, I'll come back and do the gold medal. So she won, and she was heading out to do compete against Russia for the gold medal. Now in 2012, Ireland was still coming out of this, the Great Recession, and it had been hit hard in 2008. So, the entire economy was hit. So you show up at this convention center, and it holds, I think, 8,500. About 8,300 were from Ireland. And I talked to people beforehand. Like, there are folks who hadn't been working for a while. They sold things. They sold an old watch to get the flight from Ireland, whether it be, somewhere in Dublin, which is near where Katie Taylor was from, to get over to London, get a ticket, and get in there. And she walks out there, and it was an eruption like I've never seen. And I've been to a Super Bowl, I've been to Stanley Cup playoffs. Like, the aluminum stands were vibrating, people were roaring. Ireland doesn't win a lot of gold medals. We're talking about Canada. Ireland wins even fewer. And this woman, Katie Taylor, who trained in Bray in a pub. This sounds like I'm making the story up, Andrew. I'm not. There was no bathroom above the in the gym where she was working. So to use the bathroom, she had to go to the pub downstairs. There was no heat in the winter. It was like an Irish Rocky, basically. So she goes out there and she has the weight of the country on her shoulder. They're showing it back in Ireland on a big screen in what's like Downsview Park, right? Like, it's just this massive outdoor facility, and she has all of that on her shoulders, and she goes out and she wins. And at the end, she's standing there with the Irish flag draped over her shoulder, and the crowd's just exploding. And they won't leave. The organizers like, hey, we need this space after. We have to get more people in. But there's this pure joy, and something that I don't think you get in pro sports, as weird as that sounds, because it meant something to every single one of those folks there. And that's the power of Olympic sport. And I could go on and on. I mean, I was at the bottom of the hill when Jan Hudets won in Sochi, talking about repaired knees. and what that meant to him and his journey. Like Gilmore Junio in Sochi when he gave up his spot to a teammate. Like the Olympics, you mentioned this earlier, like the Olympics are the best run by some of the worst. Like when
It's
you
the
get
same
to the
thing as like the
games,
World Cup, right? It's like
you
this
get to the
amazing
games, it's like,
event.
yeah, you fall in love with all of these athletes and all of their stories because they are triumphs, they are struggles, they are adversity, and here they are on the stage, and let's have a moment to celebrate them. It's fantastic. There's nothing, and I say this very seriously. There's nothing I love more than the Olympic Games.
Yeah, they are a truly special event. I'm looking now. I
Mm.
had it written down about Canada is, I think, seventh in the team figure skating as well now. Um, looks like they did a little bit better in the. I didn't get a chance to watch any of the figure skating yet. They did pretty well in the rhythm dance. I know it's not the story that we got obsessed with the ice dancing when it was the team, but it seems like they're in a pretty good position there. I don't know if Canada has a chance to really medal in the team figure skating, but I would assume that there's a couple events there that they have a chance because there's usually
Ice dance, I think,
some
was
decent.
fourth after the first event last night. I
Yeah,
think.
four's not too bad.
No, I mean there's still a long program to go. But yeah, no, it's going
Yeah.
to be tough to top anything Virtue and Moyer ever did, for
Oh
sure.
yeah, that was an iconic moment for
Yep.
forever. I mean, even today there was a bunch of people posting just their long program with like different music to it, and it was all over Twitter. Just the mere mention of figure skating or ice dancing in the Olympics, and immediately the Virtua Moyer stuff comes up.
There's
And
another sport I could never do. Like I would never
oh
ever
yeah,
try that. Like I would never try figure skating because I need elbow pads, I need helmets, I need shin guards. Like no way. And what Virtue and Moyer did, I still can't properly explain.
yeah, Sean, I can't dance with shoes on. You put skates on at the same time. It's a bad scene.
Cheers.
It's not going to work out too well. The opening ceremonies are coming up pretty shortly here. Do you have any expectations? Because I know that Beijing kind of set the standard for the Summer Olympics a few years ago in incredible fashion, what they're able to accomplish just by throwing money and incredibly well trained people at the thing. Do we think we're going to see another you know Olympics defining opening ceremony here?
I think the crowd could be a bit smaller.
Yes, that's true. That's true.
It's this one's a tough one because it's the Olympics are in its ideal form about coming together. I mean, you get all the stories. One of the great stories that comes out every 2 years is how the local organizing committee has to hand out like tens of thousands of condoms in the athletes village because the second you're done competing, like you've been training for 4 years or your whole life to get here, yeah, you're goddamn right, you're going to party, right? Like we're not getting any of that. I mean, getting it, no pun intended. But like, you're not going to get that social aspect of it, right? You're not going to see the shots of mom and dad in the stands. You're
Yeah.
not going to get the shots of friends and family, and the sister who helped drive you to all those practices, or all of that. You're not going to get that, and you strip away a lot of it. So I think it might feel a bit transactional. Maybe even watching it from here, it's like it's just the sport. It's like, I'm just watching, the Habs and Leafs in an empty barn, which is essentially at that point just a hockey game buffered around a bunch of beer and car commercials, right? Like it's just a
Yeah.
transaction. So you're going to strip away some of that. I think, speaking strictly of today, I'll be really interested to see how NBC and CBC cover the broader issues around China hosting these games. That we know that China was awarded these games by 4 votes over Kazakhstan, in part because a bunch of other countries lowered their hand, saying no, we don't want to host it. It's way too expensive. And then how NBC and CBC treat the important real world news around these games. So not inside the Olympic bubble, but we're talking about the human rights abuses. We're talking about suppression of pro-democracy movements, obviously Tibet, Taiwan, the Uyghur population. How are they going to treat that with their folks on the ground? That'll be one thing I'm watching today.
Yeah, that's the thing, is like it's always a little bit complicated with the Olympics, and this year infinitely more so. It's like every time you catch yourself enjoying it too much, you got to kind of like rein it in a little bit and think about the other consequences, which it's unfortunate that that's where we are with this, but
Well, it's not even, I
we
mean, the
can't ignore
Olympics
it.
are the big one, but I mean, look where the World Cup is this year as well for
Yep.
FIFA. You mentioned FIFA. I mean, it's in Qatar. And I mean, you flip on the TV this morning, like Dustin Johnson's golfing in Saudi Arabia, and nobody's really talking about that. Yeah. So the idea of, I think, Scott Stinson, sports columnist, mentioned, a couple of weeks ago that 2022 is going to be the year that we have to learn to talk about sport washing and what that all means. And I think that, for all intents and purposes, that starts today.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. I don't think I answered the question when they asked what was my favorite sport other than hockey. It's a tough one. I feel like the 2010 Olympics between the Dufour-Lapointe sisters and Alexandre Bilodeau were such a big thing. Like I really enjoy that event. I really enjoy all the new events that they're adding. Like I think that the Winter Olympics have suffered for a long time from having not enough events that aren't cross country skiing. I kind of went on a rant on the first show that I don't like cross country skiing because it just seems like it's an excuse to give Norway a bunch of medals because they're amazing at it. But I want to see more new events. I love the mixed doubles curling. I love the added snowboard stuff. I'm not like I don't even really like half pipe that much, but I really like the slope styles. The snowboard cross, I guess it's called. That's really fun to me. The race aspect of it almost reminds me like of a video game, which is fun. And I would like to see them add something like 3-on-3 hockey in the future, especially if
You're
we
just
get a
saying that because you
situation.
played Chell, right?
Yeah, I mean, why wouldn't you have both 3-on-3 hockey and 5-on-5 hockey? Just add some variety, and I feel like you could have
Only
guys
if
that are
Steve Dangle does
specialized in that.
play-by-play of that one. Only if Dangle does play-by-play of the 3-on-3.
Steve Dangle, yeah, Steve Dangle does his little streams for the 3-on-3,
I
reacting
can't
to
see
it.
why not do that at the Olympic level. It's time.
Yeah, why not? That would be fantastic. CBC, call Steve, hire him. Other than that, I think we probably covered everything in big from day 2 of the Olympics. Is there anything you're looking forward to for day 3, Sean?
Oh man, you know what? Like one of the great things about the Olympics, and again, Olympics are the best, run by the worst, is that you can settle into a games and think, okay, I'm looking forward to this, I'm looking forward to that, and then you completely fall in love and become obsessed with something else. Like I
Yes.
could I could sit here talk to you in 10 days and say, holy crap, can you believe that biathlon finish? And I wouldn't know anything about how many targets or what the bullet is or how they shoot it, but all of a sudden now I've gone down the Google rabbit hole and I can tell you the different models of the air rifles they're using, and oh, I can't believe they made that decision. And like that's the best part of the Olympics, is that you fall into these things and you become so engrossed and you fall down the rabbit hole forever.
Yeah, and you start doing things like any judged sport, you're like, I can't believe they gave them that award. And
Right?
you're
I wouldn't know
freaking
a
out.
triple axel if it a triple axel. I wouldn't be able to properly define it if you literally kicked me in the face with it. But by the end of these 2 weeks, for about 2 hours, I'm going to have an opinion on it.
Yeah, 100%. That's exactly it. All right, we'll wrap it up there because everybody's gonna be tuning into the opening ceremonies shortly here. But before we close things off, Sean, tell everybody where they can find your work.
Yeah, I mean, at the Athletic, I'm on Twitter, although probably more than anybody should be. And yeah, just floating around in the end of a pandemic. Hopefully the end of a pandemic.
Yeah, geez, hopefully that would be nice. Have some sort of defined end here at some point.
Just want to get out of the basement, Andrew. I just want to get out of here. It's fine, but the lighting could be better, obviously. But I just like to get outside.
Yeah, I hear that. Like a dream of spring, It's weather-wise and pandemic-wise. We're all hoping for it.
And you're
But
not going to be encumbered by having to stay inside and watch any playoffs in the spring.
this is true. I will not. Thanks.
Sorry.
That's all right. All right. And for those interested, there are links in the description, both on the YouTube channel and on the podcast, to Sean's book. So you should check that out as well. I think it's a link to the Amazon profile for that book, so you can check it out. And thanks, Sean, for joining me here today. Thanks for everybody for tuning in. And Omar White will be joining the show tomorrow to host because he's covering for weekends. So I look forward to that. We'll see you. I'll see you on Monday, unless I have to jump in tomorrow if